Stephanie, how are you? Is Stephanie here?
I am.
Yes, would you go ahead and call the roll? So I want to welcome you all to the evening of the second phase of our millage rate meeting. It is 5 o'clock for the record, and we will start with the invocation by Dunn Ash, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon. Let us pray. Father God, it is in the name of Jesus, God. Thank you for another opportunity, God. Lord, we come before your presence, God, seeking your wisdom and guidance as we work through the COVID situation we're in and to better this county, God. For you have blessed us, God, and we ask you to keep us. Lord God, let our minds be focused on you in every decision we make throughout this day. Lord, we give you praise, honor, and glory in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We'll go with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, the meeting is now called to order, and I would like to entertain the motion for the acceptance of the agenda with two additions that were not on there that we've added for this evening's meeting. We've added the finance resolution from this morning, which was tabled and unfinished business, as well as the Jonesboro Road lighting agreement that was tabled from April 7th, 2020. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to accept the agenda, unless you commissioners have anything else you want to add. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Stephanie, we have a 5-0 with a unanimous vote for the acceptance of the agenda.
Thank you.
At this time, Mr. Harris, we would like to call you and County Manager Matthews Hobson to the front to discuss the 2020-2021 millage rate and give us the presentation. Are you all ready, Sherry? Or
Yes, ma'am, Vice Chair, we're ready. I'll turn it over to our Tax Commissioner, Mr. Harris, to go through his presentation, followed by the presentation of myself and the County Attorney.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Vice Chair Clemens and Commissioners. Again, we're going to go through, this is the second of 3 public hearings we're doing. Just giving an overview of the millage. I have a brief PowerPoint, and let me pull that up real quick now. Share screen. 1. Do you have it?
We got it.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, this is a brief overview of just what the millage rate is. Millage rates are the tax rates that are used to calculate local property taxes. The rate itself represents the amount a homeowner has to pay for every $1,000 of a property's assessed value. The assessed value includes both the structure, the house itself, as well as the land that it sits on. Your tax bill will include 2 separate property values, the fair market value and the assessed property value. The fair market value is, this is what's determined by the tax assessor's office. They go out annually and use a variety of different methodologies to determine what the fair market value is for any particular structure. And then in April or May, they'll mail out an assessment notice to every Henry County property owner, letting them know what their estimate for their property assessment will be. And at that point, all taxpayers have 45 days to appeal the value to the Board of Commissioners if they should so choose. To the Board of Assessors, rather, I'm sorry. The Board of Assessors if they should so choose. The assessed value is simply the fair market value that's been established by the assessor's office multiplied by 40%. So the assessed value, or the value in which you are taxed at, represents 40% of your actual fair market value. Again, just a quick example of calculating a county property tax. The formula is relatively simple. It's simply the assessed value that we just talked about, subtracting any exemptions that will apply, and that times your millage rate will equal your taxes due. This is an example that contemplates only county taxes, doesn't get into the school board or anything like that, just simply the county taxes that are due. So you see on the left-hand side, example number 1 is a property that has homestead exemption. So a homesteaded property with a fair market value of $200,000. That times 40% would give you an assessed value of $80,000. The standard L1 exemption, and we'll touch on that in just a moment, would be $15,000. So it'd be 80 subtracting the 15,000 would leave you a taxable value of $65,000. That $65,000 times your millage rate, which in this case would be 0.012733. What we typically call, again, as that is, that's per $1,000 of the home's value. So it's 12.733 becomes the mill rate. So that taxable value times your mill rate equates to a tax of $827.65 in county taxes. Again, that's based on the standard L1 exemption. Taking that same house without homestead, again, same $200,000 valued home, fair market value is $200,000, assessed value would be $80,000. However, if you do not have the homestead, that $15,000 subtraction does not apply. So it'd be $80,000, your entire assessed value times the millage rate of still 12.733, and that would give you a county tax amount of $1,018.64. So again, on average, between homestead and non-homesteaded for a $200,000 property value at $200,000, you're looking at a difference of roughly about $200. Again, that's going to vary obviously based on the property value. So always encourage people to please always, if the home is your principal domicile, to make sure that they apply for homestead. We're often asked what happens to my bill if the property value goes up, however, the millage rate remains the same, which is very applicable here in Henry County, as Board of Commissioners has retained the same millage rate for several years now. So in this case, again, using the same value of a home valued at $200,000, if we were to make the assertion that values went up 10% to $220,000, you would take that new value, 220 times 40%, which would give you an $88,000 assessed value. Again, that's the value that you'll be taxed on. So that $88,000 times your millage rate would equate to $1,120 for a non-homesteaded property. That's an increase of about $100. Again, just based on seeing your property value go up 10%, you would still likely see a $100 increase if the property is not homesteaded. If it is homesteaded, then that means that you would have, the moment you file for homestead, you're also automatically put into the frozen exemption, where your county tax rate is frozen at that base year amount. And again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but it should be noted that the frozen exemption does not apply to school taxes or improvements that you make to your house or additional land acquired. So if you have your standard home and you do an addition, that frozen exemption would not apply to that extension or that addition. We're talking about exemptions. I want to go through a few real quick. Again, the standard exemption for the county, and this is this is your principal home, your principal domicile. It's $15,000. So $15,000 off the top is deducted from your assessed value. Additional exemptions come into place when you reach age 62, and those would apply to your school taxes. At age 62, you get an additional exemption, and at 65, both school and water taxes also get another exemption as well, and that increases at age 68. And at age 70, at that point you're reaching full exemption from all school taxes. Additional exemptions that exist are for disability exemptions, veterans disability exemptions, surviving spouse of a peace officer or firefighter, conservation, Freeport, forest land protection. And again, back to the frozen exemption, which is one we talked about quite a bit last year. I want to touch on a little bit more just to give people another view of what exactly it means. The frozen exemption was enacted by local legislation back in 2004. This was done by the commission at the time, principally because home values were increasing at a tremendous rate with all the influx of new homes moving into Henry County. So the commission took the step of adding this frozen provision, which allows homeowners that are using the home as their primary residence and up to 5 acres to freeze their home value beginning that following tax year. So if you were to apply today, again after the April 1st deadline, your base year would still be 2020, whatever the value of your home would be based on in 2020, and then going forward, even though your property value may increase, you would still be taxed. Your county tax would still be taxed at that value that you had in 2020. So if in 2020 your home was valued at $200,000 and in 2025 your home is valued at $300,000, for your county taxes, you would still be taxed only at that $200,000 rate. So again, you can see what a tremendous benefit it is for citizens of Henry County. The exemption is automatically renewed from year to year, so long as the resident occupies the residence as their homestead. The homeowner pays on the base value for the county and portions of the tax bill, even if the value increases beyond the base year. If the property value decreases below base year, the homeowner would only pay the lower valuation number. So again, if this is really a tool to be utilized to help make sure folks' taxes don't go exceedingly too high on the county side. Again, we were able to capture it on the county side. And even if it does go below the base year value, you would still pay just that lower valuation. So again, it's a tremendous tool. Always want to show this, just give all of our residents an idea of exactly where our tax dollars, how they're divvied out. As you can see from the pie chart above, it is 50% of the taxes collected goes towards the maintenance and operations for our schools. An additional 8% is for the school bond. And again, the school bond is for the building of new schools, improvements to the schools, things of that nature. So a total of 58% of all taxes collected on average typically go to our Board of Education. 37% of the taxes collected, or 12.733 mils, is used for county government operations. We'll delve into that a little bit more as well. And the remaining 5% is for the Water Authority bond. And again, that's for a number of the improvements that have been in place with the Water Authority, including things like our reservoirs. I briefly want to talk about the tax digest process. The digest itself is a listing of assessments and exemptions. This consists of both real and personal property, so things like your land, your home, as well as your vehicles and boats and things of that nature personal property that you may have, timber, mobile homes, motor vehicles, heavy-duty equipment, and public utilities. The digest must be approved by the State Department of Revenue before tax bills can be mailed out. Bills must be received 60 days in advance of the due date. Here in Henry County, our due date has typically always been November 16th. So we're really diligent to make sure that tax bills are mailed out by September 1st to make sure that we have ample time to make sure we're well within that 60-day time frame. The digest process, again, it's certainly not just my office. It involves a number of different entities. The process actually begins with the tax assessor's office. They go through the process of doing all their assessments. They provide that information to our office, and we consolidate that information here at the tax commissioner's office. And then from there, we work in conjunction with the Board of Education as they have to go through the process of passing their millage, and then with yourselves as the Board of Commissioners, and then with each one of the cities as well to gather their information and their assessments that will be included in for the bills for the oncoming year. Once everything is compiled, that information is forwarded to the Department of Revenue. We have a sit-down meeting with them typically around mid to late August to go through and review the digest information. Once that's approved, then we can start the process of actually generating our bills. One other item I did want to touch base on briefly, there was a question that came up earlier this morning in reference to, and the county attorney and county manager are going to touch on this, so it's probably a little bit of a segue into their conversation, but what the bills will look like, the Board of Commissioners is considering making it an amendment to the structure for the bills this year. And I wanted to provide just a quick chart showing what that change would look like. I think the Board of Commissioners and the city should be commended on taking this step, going to a special service district, because it certainly does provide more detailed information on how the millage rates are generated. So what this chart simply does is it breaks down by jurisdiction, shows the unincorporated Henry County areas, as well as the cities of Stockbridge, McDonough, Hampton, Locust Grove. And rather than what we've had in the past years, our base millage was at 12.733. Now we've reduced that base millage rate to 8.757, but it gives you a breakdown of how the remainder of that millage is generated. So 1.105, if that is for fire services, 1.8 for police services, building services, planning and zoning, recreation, and general obligation bonds. And what this shows is if you add the special service district millage rates up, you'll have, for the unincorporated Henry County areas, a special service district SSD millage rate of 3.976. And again, based on the services that are being provided to each one of the municipalities, in the city of Stockbridge, it's fire and police, as well as recreation and a general obligation bond, their special service millage rate would be 3.741, and on down the line. McDonough has theirs, Hampton, based on the services that are provided by the county. So what you'll see on your bill going forward will be a county millage rate of 8.757 and an additional special service district rate of, again, in unincorporated areas, 3.9, Stockbridge 3.7, and so on. So what it does is it provides a slightly more transparency in how the millage rate is generated and what those millage rates go towards, what types of services. So again, I commend the Board of Commissioners and the cities for taking this step, because I think it does provide more information for our residents. Again, as noted, this does not include, the following additional millage rates also apply to tax bills: the school maintenance and operations, as shown on the pie chart, of 20 mils, the school bond of 3.6, and the water authorities 2.0 mils. With that, again, this is the second of 3 public hearings, the third being on August 11th at 6 p.m., at which time we'll move forward adoption of the millage rate. And Madam Vice Chair, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments from the board or from the public. And let me go back and unshare my screen.
We will let the board go, and then we will open it up for public comments, just in case some of the questions that the public has is included in the commissioner's public comments. But I do want you to explain a little bit about the frozen. I know we talked about this every year, but with the frozen, there's not an annual renewal required for that. I don't remember it because we weren't here in 2004 to see what exactly happened with that. But that may be something that we need. I don't know if that's something that the board would have to go back and look at the resolution on that, or if it's something you guys would do. And if that frozen changes, and these are just questions you can answer later, but if that frozen changes based on somebody selling their property, and how do you keep up with the titles changing? Once the person comes in and they get the frozen and they bought a property for $50,000, now they've, done some work to the property's worth $150,000. Now I'm just using hypothetical numbers. How do we, and then they'll still be taxed at that 50 every year forever. So I think that's something that we've got to look at going forward and find out how much money we're losing by that frozen not being an annual renewal with the new assessment. So just something to keep, you don't have to answer it now, but that's something that we need to look into.
Sure.
Okay. Any other commissioners have comments? Okay. All right. Well, we'll open the floor up now. This is a public hearing, and it is in reference to our millage rate for 2020, 2021. Stephanie, do we have any people that have signed up for public comments for the millage rate hearing?
Yes, we have one, Vanessa Thomas, and she should be on the line. I will call.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Thomas, you have 3 minutes to have the floor. And if you could just ask all of your questions, and then we'll see what we can do to help you at the end.
Right, that's what I was planning on doing this time. And thank you so much for giving me another opportunity to be able to express my questions. First of all, as I continue to look at that chart, Michael Harris, that you just put up, the 2020 millage rate chart. Now, so for, let's say for unincorporated, it's like 12.733. So that's for those that live in the unincorporated area. So now from how I'm looking at it, so then everyone that lives in the different cities, that's how much they're going to be paying for county millage rate. Is that correct? Is that what I'm looking at?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So now, okay. So then my question is then, based on the total county millage rates for unincorporated plus all the other cities, have those increased, and if so, by how much? And what's like an estimated dollar amount will our property taxes increase to, as an example?
Yeah. So no, it has not.
I'm sorry. And next question is, as far as the frozen exemption, what's the criteria or the requirements for a resident, to be able to apply for a frozen exemption if they so desire to do so?
Sure.
And that is all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And Vice Chair, I think I can take them both. Your first one in reference to the millage rates. No, the 12.733 that's proposed and that's shown, and again, it hasn't been finalized by the Board of Commissioners yet, but what is shown here would not represent an increase in the millage. The millage has been 12.733 for at least the last 4 years. So that does not represent an increase there, nor from the other cities. Now, how the individual millage rates for the services has been calculated, that's something that was discussed between the Board of Commissioners and in each one of the respective cities. But again, with the intent being that the millage rate itself, the overall millage rate, did not change. So again, the county millage rate did not change in this case, nor did the rate for the Board of Education, the Water Authority, or the school bond. So what you'll likely see this year, which is why I put that example up, is you're likely going to see an increase in property values. However, when you have an increase in property values, but your millage rate remains the same, your bill will likely still go up based on the percentage that, 10%, 15%, based on the amount of the property value increase. However, if you have the frozen provision, and again, once you apply for homestead, and the requirements for applying for homestead it varies. But for your L1, as long as it's your principal residence, if you're married, both husband and wife need to reside at the residence. Again, we have actually the application is shown on our website and all the criteria that's required. But once you apply for your initial homestead, at that point, you're automatically put into the frozen, your frozen exemption automatically kicks in. So it's not something that needs to be, you don't have to reapply on an annual basis. That's not required either. So in that case, the amount of your county taxes, if you are homesteaded, would not increase. However, as we looked at the pie chart previously, 58% of the taxes that are generated here go toward the Board of Education. Their millage rate has been set for the last number of years as well. They're maxed out at 20 for maintenance operations. They're maxed out at a 20 mil for maintenance operations, and their school bond is 3.628, and that's been fixed for a number of years. So if your property value goes up 10%, it would still be that increased value for your property times that 23.62 mils. So again, we looked at it from a county perspective based on 12 mils. So if you're looking at, in that case, if you did not have homestead, you're talking about an increase of about $100. So you're looking at a couple $100 depending on the value of how much your property increases and what exemptions you have in place.
Okay, thank you for explaining that to me. And I certainly appreciate you all putting up that 2020 millage rate, because that really, really defines everything, and how we as residents can be able to see it and understand, what we're paying for and at what percentage. And it's not necessarily the 12.733 as I thought all along for those that are not living in the unincorporated county. But, we're paying a different rate based on the city that we're living in. So thank you for showing that to us, and thank you for that information.
Sure thing. And I believe the county attorney and county manager will get in more in depth on this specific topic in the next item.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Harris, I think the question and where people are getting confused with the frozen is that they're thinking if they bought a house in 2004, well, let's say they bought a house in 2013 and the house was 169, the value has gone up to 250, but their taxes have went up where they're actually paying taxes on the 250 and it wasn't frozen at the 169. Can you explain that?
Yeah, if they applied for homestead and they were awarded homestead in that initial year when the value was 169, then their county taxes should be frozen at that 169 value. Now,
What do they do if it's not, and if it's coming in and they have a question about that?
Yeah, they can come see myself or the tax assessor's office, either one, that we can look at. And we get those questions quite often. People have individual questions, want to know why is it not, or are they? Sometimes people, it will be frozen on the county side, but they are still seeing an increase. And typically that increase is on the Board of Education side, because again, those values are not frozen on the Board of Education side.
Right. Okay.
So, and I get, every day we get phone calls about, exactly how the frozen provision works. Are their bills accurate? And we deal with those every day. So we always encourage people to please make sure they contact us and call. One of the commissioners asked earlier about information that's sent to new property owners. This is a pamphlet that gets mailed out to all new property owners. And in here, it talks about the frozen provision. It talks about homestead application, the process, what's needed, and how to go through it, who to contact. So again, this is mailed out. I think we mailed out about 300 today, actually, to all new residents within Henry County. And again, beyond that, we have information on our website. And always feel free to give us a call. That's what we're here for.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions for Commissioner Harris? Commissioner Wilson?
Hey, Michael, now on the frozen homestead, I think a quick reference to assure that these taxpayers are getting their frozen homestead is look at the homestead exemption on that line. Right. Because the homestead exemption is where it's all absorbed at. And there may be some people out there that's getting 4 or 5 times of the, it could be $40,000, $50,000 in homestead. And so if they're doing that, it means they are absorbing that frozen homestead. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. And they should. And I think that's part of the reason why this process is set up the way it is, where the tax assessor's office will send out those assessment notices. And on those notices, it'll indicate what exemption you have in place. If you have any exemption, L1, L2, L3, L6, L12, then that means you've applied for homestead, it's been approved, and your frozen should be in place. More often than not, unfortunately, people will call and ask, what happened? Why am I paying this? And my neighbor's paying far less, and they will not have homestead. And they just didn't realize they had to go back and apply, or they forgot to apply for homestead when they initially bought the home. So that's a far more common comment that we receive. But it's indicated on the assessment notice as well as on the tax bill itself.
But on your tax bill, though, you could see as much as $50,000 in homestead exemption. If that's the case, that's what absorbs the taxes that your assessments went up, but your taxes stay the same. Yeah. It's all absorbed in that increase of homestead exemption.
I see what you're saying. You're right. So under the county tax, where typically the standard county exemption would be $15,000, you may see, to your point, you may see an exemption, and that number may be 15, 20, 30, 40,000. And what that represents is that differential. You're absolutely right. Okay. So that is captured as part of your exemption. It is not a separate line that says frozen exemption. It's all wound up and it all wrapped up within the county tax exemption. So again, if you're just receiving typically the first year someone applies, they'll only receive that standard L1 $15,000 exemption. As your property value goes up, that $15,000 value would also increase based on the savings that you're having for being frozen. That's a good point.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we've had our commissioners' comments and public comments at this time. There is no more discussion on this. This was just for discussion. We'll vote on it on August 11th at the 6:00 p.m. meeting. And we just want to encourage any citizens that were not on, did not get their questions answered, to please reach out to our tax commissioner's office. If you wish to be heard, you can speak at the August 11th, but we urge you to speak and get your questions answered before the 11th. At this time, we'll move on to the next item, which will be our special tax districts from our county manager and county attorney.
Good evening, Vice Chair and board members. As presented to you all this morning, we wanted to update the board specifically on the creation of our special service districts. We had a lot of conversation this morning, and I won't go through all of it, but I would like to recap the information that Michael has shared, and then I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to actually go through the maps which outline those special service districts. As you all are aware, and I think Patrick has done a couple of presentations to the board on how we designate and create our special service districts. And the one question we ask is, what services will the county provide to the respective cities, and or what services can the cities provide outside of what the county can provide? And so what we've gone in and done is, in conversation with the cities, we've identified, again, which government services we will provide and which government services the cities will provide. And then we identify the funding mechanism. So what I'm going to do is allow Patrick to go through the actual 4 service districts that we are recommending. And then on August the 11th, we will bring forth a resolution for this board to approve and authorize us to create those special service districts so that the tax commissioner can proceed with sending out our tax notices based on the creation of those special service districts. So at this time, I'll pause and allow us to transition the screen over, and then you'll hear from Mr. Patrick Johnstetter.
Sure. Here's those maps. Maps we have this morning. We still have the same. Oh, yeah. I've got them. Y'all bear with us. We're on a different thumb drive. Sure. Those, yeah. No, do. Okay. All right. Thank you, and I apologize for the delay. We're still learning all this technology. So, as I discussed this morning, we are proposing to the board to create 4 service districts within the county. The first district is what we're referring to as the General Obligation Service District. In this district, Henry County will assess a tax, a millage rate, for all of the services that are listed at the bottom of the page. I don't want to go through all of those, but those are essentially services that the county provides to all citizens within the Henry County, regardless of whether or not you live in a city. And that is the bulk of the county services. And I think the millage rate for that general obligation service district, that's the number that's going to be 8.7 or some number like that. So this is the graphic depiction of those services. And I think it helps to see it graphically. So if you live anywhere within Henry County, inside or outside of a city, you will pay a millage rate towards the general obligation service district. I'm going to switch to the next screen, and I'm going to step away while that's done. Okay. So the next one is a fire service district. And one of the things I sort of want to clarify, we frequently say we provide whether we provide the service to the city or not. We don't really provide services to cities. We provide services to residents. So if you live in the fire services district, which is the entire county with the exception of the city of McDonough, then Henry County provides to you as a resident fire services. So if you live in that area, shaded in gray on this map, you pay a millage rate towards those services. City of McDonough residents, we do not provide fire services to City of McDonough residents, so they do not pay a millage rate. Now, there will be, and I think Commissioner Thomas asked this question before, about sort of the auxiliary or supplemental services we provide. We will, and we're working on right now, a mutual aid agreement for fire services with the City of McDonough, which recognizes that sometimes we will help them out on fire calls and sometimes they will help us out on fire calls. And it will have some limitations and it'll have sort of the rules of that arrangement. And we're still working on that. But as far as the millage rate goes, if you live in the fire service district, which consists of unincorporated Henry County, City of Stockbridge, City of Hampton, and City of Locust Grove, you will pay a millage rate towards the fire services. Let's see if I can do it. All right. So the next one is police services. Likewise, if you live in the unincorporated area of Henry County or within the municipal boundaries of the City of Stockbridge, you will reside in the Henry County Police Services District. And if you reside in that district, you will pay a millage rate towards police services. McDonough, Hampton, and Locust Grove have their own police departments, so those residents are not the recipients of our services. Those residents pay a city millage rate, or the city funds their police services in another revenue source. So this would be an instance where if you live in the gray area, you pay the millage rate towards police services. If you live in the white area, the cities, you don't pay that. And again, we'll have mutual aid agreements with those other city police departments that define when and how we help each other out on police calls. The last district is what we're calling the unincorporated services districts. This district includes only the unincorporated areas of the county. It does not include any of the cities. And the services that we only provide to benefit the residents of the unincorporated areas of the county are those few services listed on the bottom of that, which are GIS and mapping, stormwater collection and disposal, waste management, building department, planning, zoning, code enforcement, and community development. Those services we do not provide within the cities. And so city residents, because they don't receive those services, they don't pay the tax towards them. The cities are responsible for providing those services to their residents. And if you live in a city, you do not pay a millage rate for it. So only unincorporated residents pay that millage rate. And so that's what these service districts do. They ensure that residents pay taxes for services they receive in the areas they receive. And it's not that we're providing a service to a city or not providing a service to a city. It's whether or not we're providing the service to the taxpayer. So this is designed in a way to ensure that taxpayers don't have to pay the county for a service and also pay their city for a service. If, for instance, planning and zoning, each one of the cities takes care of their own planning and zoning. We don't do any zoning within the cities, so we would not impose a tax to a city resident to pay for county planning and zoning services. They will pay that. They pay that tax, or their city finds another way to fund it. So those are it's really 3 districts plus the overall area of the county, which is what we're going to propose to you. And at the next meeting, at the August 11th meeting, we will accompany this presentation with resolutions, and you'll be able to see how these maps actually translate into the tax bill. And so it'll all flow a little cleaner for the residents. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll be presenting this again on August 11th.
Patrick, could you explain community development tax monies? How is that dispensed back out to the community, and the stormwater and collections? And then we'll see if any other commissioners have any questions.
Yeah, so stormwater is primarily a fee. You pay a stormwater fee, that fee is assessed on your tax bill, and that fee is assessed only to unincorporated residents. I believe that Mr. Harris actually collects city stormwater fees on the tax bills as well, but those funds go to the city. So our stormwater management department, they don't get into the cities. They handle stormwater management only in the unincorporated areas. Now, community development, that budget item deals with CDBG and NSP. And again, we limit those services to the unincorporated areas. We're not providing our CDBG. We do on occasion. So Sherry's going to talk
Yes,
about
let me correct.
Clarify that, Sherry, because CDBG funds are federal funds and those are not tax dollars that we're collecting. So I want you to clarify that.
Yes. So CDBG and our NSP program are both federally funded programs, which is housed through our community development program. But the cities do benefit and receive the services from our community development department. I was looking at that list, and that's my oversight. That actually needs to be moved over under
that. Probably first to develop.
and their economic development. Let me look at that one, but yes, Commissioner Clemens, it is definitely federally funded. There are no general fund dollars that go into it because those are all federal dollars that we receive for NSP and CDBG.
Yeah, it's important with that. If we're going to do this tax allocation district and we're saying this is what we're collecting dollars for, we're going to have constituents to say, I'm paying for code enforcement. I want code enforcement. I'm paying for stormwater. And they want to know what they can do because we get constant calls about retention ponds not being cleaned and that kind of stuff, which is all supposed to be stormwater. You know, we're dealing with a sinkhole and a pothole right now, Sherry. And then that community development, don't clarify it now, look it up and be able to tell us by August 11th what those things are.
Yeah, and I believe what happened is we switched community development and economic development, which is your development authority. So I expect that's what it is, but we'll look into that. But these service districts, Commissioner Clemens, will achieve exactly the purpose that you stated. So if I'm paying a tax for stormwater management to the county, if I'm paying a county stormwater management fee, then I should call the county stormwater management department. If I'm paying a city stormwater management fee, I should call the city with those complaints. And that's what this is aimed to do. This is aimed to ensure that the entity receiving the tax money is the entity that's going to be responsible to the citizens. So, but we'll clarify these last couple of departments and we'll have it all locked down for you.
That's fair. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from any other commissioners about the special tax districts? Okay. All right, and that's for discussion only as well. So we don't have a vote on that. The only thing that we have now is the finance. Are you guys ready for the finance package?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Patrick's going to be presenting that.
Bear with us 1 second. We have to switch discs again.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you got to share. Okay. So thank you, board. I want to, before I start on the call with us or on the meeting with us today, are Bill Camp and Courtney Rogers. And they are the people that have made this happen together with your finance director, with David Smith. And I'm going to be turning it over, I believe, to Mr. Rogers in a moment, but I want to walk through a couple of introductory things for the board just to sort of put it into perspective. So today we're going to be asking you to approve your SPLOST general obligation bond and your capital financing loan of financing issues. So the first one I want to talk about is your SPLOST 5 GO bond. And if you will recall, the board authorized and the voters approved the issuance up to $30 million in debt. That debt is technically a general obligation bond, which means that that debt is paid either from your SPLOST 5 collections or from ad valorem taxes if your SPLOST revenue is insufficient to service the debt. I'm going to right now turn it over to Mr. Rogers, Courtney Rogers from Davenport Financial. He's going to tell you what this loan looks like from a financial standpoint, because today was the day, as I mentioned this morning, they priced and sold those bonds. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of my screen share so Mr. Rogers can do the same thing. And we're going to switch back. Okay. So now, Courtney, if you could share your screen.
I will. It's not giving me permission though.
Bear with us. We're going to fix that for you.
Ah, right. There we go. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Good evening, Vice Chair Clemens and commissioners. We had a good day today, but first I wanted to go back and tell you that we had to go back to Moody's to get a bond rating for the two bonds. And as you recall, you were upgraded to AAA last fall, and we're pleased to say that they reaffirmed that or affirmed that rating when we went back and talked to them. And I will say that it's no small feat considering we're in the middle of a COVID crisis. So what they basically said was that you continue to experience healthy economic expansion with your residential and commercial development, which is great. They noted your financial position is very strong, supported by long-term financial planning, fiscal policies that we put in place. They noted your reserves that have increased very substantially over the last 5 years, and your debt and pension burdens are both very manageable. Their outlook was basically that they reflecting the likelihood that you'll continue with this financial position being very strong, that your trend of operating surpluses would continue, supported by the fiscal policies and the planning, and that your tax base will continue to expand. So that was a very positive thing and very important step in this financing process. The next thing, of course, is interest rates. And as many of you may recall, back in we were working to do this a little sooner, but the COVID crisis and market disruption took place back in March, and you can see on the right-hand side, this is 20-year interest rates and how much it jumped in just a very short period during the market disruption. And so we decided to put things on hold and let the market settle out, which it did. And that's paid hefty dividends because the rates have continued to drop. And what you'll see on this slide 4 is that gold line represents the current yield curve from year 1 to year 30 of taxes and interest rates for AAA entities such as yourself. And what you'll see is they are at the lowest that we have ever seen. So we've hit the market at a very, very good time. I'm going to go through the SPLOST transaction first, and then Patrick's going to take back over, and then I'll come back and give you a summary on the lease, capital lease transaction. So as you all know, as Patrick mentioned, 30 million was our max that we could issue. And Bill or Tom Owens is also on from Raymond James, and they can talk in a minute. I'm going to let them speak to why the buyers would want to do this, but the buyers wanted to basically pay a premium for these bonds, which means they pay us more than 100 cents on the dollar. And so as a result, we were able to produce projects of 33,700,000 for you to spend, and that is a net number. And essentially, what happens is with the interest cost and paying back the 30 million, you're going to need about 34 million and change of that SPLOST revenues, which essentially means that it only costs you a little over $500,000 for the cost of the borrowing, which is basically interest in the cost of issuance. Very good reception in the marketplace. You had $152 million in orders, which is basically 5 times over the amount of bonds that we could sell. All in, at the end of the day, the all-in true interest cost was 0.57%, which is just unbelievable, sub 1% money for the bond issue. So with that, I will unshare my screen and turn it back over to Patrick. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Tom, you want to talk for real quick? I think Bill's still out. You're on mute. Tom, we can't hear you. I can't hear you. Yeah. Well, essentially what I'll jump in. Essentially, a lot of the buyers wanted to have a little bit higher interest return, if you would. So basically, their cash flow is a little higher on the front end, and they get less on the back end. So essentially, that's why they wanted those premiums. So Patrick, do you want to turn back over to you?
Well, sure, unless anyone else, Mr. Owens or Mr. Camp want to, if either of you want to make any comments, I'll wait. Otherwise, I'll push forward. Okay, so all that's left with respect to the SPOS bonds is for the board to approve a resolution that does all of the things on this screen. It authorizes the execution and delivery of the bond purchase agreement and basically all of the other bond closing documents. In my understanding, if I'm not, and if I'm wrong, Mr. Rogers, please correct me, I believe we're shooting for an August 18th date to close both this issue and the lease purchase, which we'll discuss in a moment. So
That's
now,
right.
unless you have any questions, we'll answer them, but otherwise we're ready for a resolution to authorize execution of all the documents related to the SPOS general obligation bond in the amount of $30 million.
So at this time, we're gonna call for a motion to approve the GOB bond for the SPOS. We have a motion and a second and a third. Commissioner Baum, we need a vote from you. Stephanie, it's a 5 unanimous vote for the GOB bond.
And now I'll launch it.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
just for the sake of the community that's watching this, I'm correct in that the county manager and deputy county manager can now proceed to bring different projects before the board for approval with the passing of the bond referendum resolution we're doing today. Is that correct?
This is for SPLOST. It's different from the capital improvement projects that we're getting ready to do next, but that is true, and this is for the SPLOST project.
Under the SPOS package, I should have said.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So,
And
I
if I
would say-
could,
I think Commissioner Holmes is probably the senior commissioner on the board, and he has some years ahead of us. As you see this morning, he's already started on his projects. So the voters voted a while ago, and I think that it would behoove all of us to get started on our projects, these road projects that we have on the agenda, to get them moving along.
Thank you.
All right, Patrick, let me share again so I can.
well, let me do this a little bit first,
Oh, yes, sir. Go
and
ahead.
then we'll get, so the next I want to move on to what we're referring to as your capital financing. And if you'll recall, you've agreed, you've authorized staff to move forward with $17 million roughly of capital financing. And that's to finance the capital projects that's been presented to you a number of times. Now, you will not be authorizing any specific project tonight. All you're doing is authorizing us to borrow the money to issue this debt so that the money is available for when we bring these projects to you for approval. So again, it's a $17 million financing vehicle that we're doing through a lease purchase finance. Now, what that means is we're going to take the Judicial Center, which is where the state court building is located, and we are going to essentially sell it to the ACCG and then lease it back from them, subject to the deed to secure debt, basically a mortgage, for the $17 loan amount, $17 million loan amount. That is the way that we engage in this type of borrowing. It's very routine. It happens on a regular basis with local governments. We have done it, I know, in the past with the jail, and I believe also at the county administration building where I'm in today. And both of those, at least the county administration building, has long been paid off. The jail is close to being paid off, if not quite paid off yet. So this $17 million is actually set up for up to 20 years. And I'm going to turn this over to Courtney Rogers for him to explain the details of that financing issue.
Great, thank you, Patrick. So similar to the SPLOST transaction, we were able to sell bonds at 17 million and produce more projects. The dollar amount that that staff gave us was to produce 19,752,000 and change. So that's the amount of projects that you'll be able to spend and identify. As Patrick mentioned, this final maturity goes out to 2040, and the payback, we structured that debt service to basically take place of some of the existing debt rolling off the general fund, some of the issues that Patrick was just mentioning. In this case, the county received $41 million in orders, so a little over 2 times. I will mention this particular issue. The county's bond rating is AAA. The SPLOST bonds, which are general obligation, full faith and credit, was also issued as a AAA bond. This one, just in case you happen to see the OS, is actually a AA1, which is 1 notch off because it's looked at by the rating agencies as basically a appropriation debt. And so it settles at 1 notch below. But still, the all-in true interest cost, you can see, it was at a wonderful 1.31%. And that's for 20-year money, as Patrick mentioned. That's one of the lowest ones that I've seen out there. Under 2% for a AAA rated county is very, very unprecedented. So happy to answer any questions on that. I don't know if Tom or Bill have their audio going and want to chime in and talk about the sale, but Raymond James did a good job selling the bonds today. And we, as you can see, had lots of folks who wanted to buy the bonds, which is a great testament to the county. Bill's back there.
Sure, yeah. Courtney did a great job. Our average bond yield of just under 0.76%. Tremendous number of folks interested. We had a lot of interest in the short end and the long end, and the firm underwrote several maturities in the middle. And in other words, good time to price, and we were aggressive in our sales efforts. Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, Patrick, we'll turn it back over to you.
Patrick, I think Commissioner Thomas has a comment or question.
I have a question for the 17 million that you just spoke about. Is there a reason that you did 17 million instead of increasing that amount? I know we want a lot more money than that. Are you going back out to shop again? Or how is that going to work? Are you doing this in phases? When I know our capital improvement project was a lot more than 17 million that we wanted. How do you plan to do that?
So I'm going to give the answer that I know to this point, and I may need management to help. So my understanding is we wanted to create $20 million, roughly. And this, by making $17 million the loan amount, we were able to generate 19 million and change. So that's what the first step of this, the current step of your long-term capital improvement program called for. So, and I think either Brad or Sherry can explain that in more detail, but I think right now that was the amount that you authorized when you approved the long-term capital improvement program. So there will be more capital money coming in the future, but you know, there's a point of taking on projects that we know we're ready to take on. You don't want to borrow money now for a project you're not going to do for 5 or 10 years. And we also want to make sure that we are catching up with the things we need to do immediately. So I think that's the reason Brad may give a better explanation.
My concern is that I know that there are some projects alone require more than $17 million. And that was my reason for asking that question. And they are projects that we are prepared to go forth with immediately. And so I'm just wondering the reason for stopping at 15, 17 million or 20 million versus 50 to 75 million so that we can start some of the larger projects that's on that list.
Yes, Commissioner. One of the rationales behind it, and this is a 3-year project and getting to where we are now, and we're excited about that and appreciate the commissioners hanging there with us, is to get to a point where we can roll off debt and take on additional debt without any additional reaction to the general fund. So as debt rolls off, and you can go to this debt here to be the first year one being $20 million. However, to move through the years, through the next 5, it's time to revamp everything again, look forward. And then as the bigger projects will require additional debt, you guys can make that decision now. As you've seen in the list that's been provided, that this is repairs of roofs that are leaking that's been going on. Our jail and jail annex is in huge repair need that is costing more and more if we don't fix it to go ahead and get it done. Our parks, there's $6 million moving towards our parks and fixing up the parks that's been, kind of left to hang by themselves and underfunded over the years. This is a shot in the arm to move forward. The big projects you're speaking of will have to come, in a planning mode to encumber that debt as the commissioners seem necessary.
Well, I'm remembering, I'm assuming David is somewhere around.
He is here with us.
Okay, well, David may need to come up here and talk to me about it. He is the finance guy. I'm not understanding why he's not speaking to us this afternoon. Yes, I said that, David, and I'm
Yes, I'd be glad to talk to
you're
you.
one of the key reasons we got to this point. You're one of the key reasons we got to this rating. And one of the key reasons we have someone else out there shopping these bonds. And I'm wondering, where are you while you're not talking to us and everybody else is? I heard what he had to say, but I'm quite sure, knowing the person that you are in finance, that you've already looked at rolling off debt in a cycle and how that debt will be rolled off and how money should be rolling into this county. It's kind of your specialty, you and these numbers. So talk to me again. I'm not satisfied with that answer. And tell me, what's the reason we're at $20 million bringing this in now versus what we had originally started talking about with our capital improvement projects, when I can think of other projects by themselves value more than $20 million each.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners, and the community. First, I want to start by saying thank you for all of the positive comments that you've made and accolades that you've given to me. But it's not just me alone. It was a tremendous amount of teamwork and effort that went into making this happen, working with Davenport, working with Raymond James, and then the investors that are actually interested in buying our bonds. You have Brad and Sherry and Patrick up here talking to you because they are truly, along with Courtney from Davenport and Doug, as well as I think we have Tom Owens and Bill, because they are truly the experts in this area, and they're the ones that went to the market themselves. You mentioned it. I'm the numbers guy. I sit back, I work out the numbers to make certain that nothing's going to hurt the county in terms of the debt, in terms of it rolling off for us so that we have enough to pay. Now I'll address the capital projects themselves. So yes, if you'll remember, there are several capital projects that may or may not total more than that 17 million. But there are some immediate needs that we had come to you before in saying that we needed to address these needs right away. And that's what this particular financing is going to do for us. We also have, along with that 30 million in bond financing, that's going to allow us to get started on several of those, I think it was level 2 type projects more immediately so that we can get going. And that's the purpose behind what we're trying to do. Now, you mentioned that Brad didn't answer your question completely or to your satisfaction. And so how do you want us to answer that question that would be satisfactory to you? Because there are going to be projects that we aren't going to be able to get done right away. But having this $17 million right now will allow us to get started on those immediate needs. And that's the goal of it. And each project we're going to bring before you before we get started on it, because they're going to be over the amount that requires us coming before the board.
One of the things, and I remember a couple of commissions emphasizing, is that if we do this, we do it. We will not piecemeal it. We will not have people bringing it to us in sections. We're not going to have to go back and grovel and find crumbs to complete it. Okay? And this feels like, well, that's what they said, but we're going to give them part of it at a time, and you're going to have to fix this as we go forth, one way or the other. I don't see where we actually have a pot of money that we thought we will have so the commissioners can determine how those monies will be allocated. What I see is enough money coming in for certain areas that will make sense to say, this is what we want and need y'all to approve it. And I don't expect you to answer that, Mr. David. I really don't. I'm just saying the way it feels, it's not what I like. And how it's coming in here, it's not what I like. When we said, and I think I remember one commissioner said, look, find $150 million. If we're gonna do this, let's do it. So I don't like the way it feels at this intro. I don't like the way it's coming to us. It looks as if, again, we made a very bold statement in pulling this off, but we may be caught in how we can actually use it and do it. So do not reply. That was just my comment, okay?
Okay.
So, thank you, Vice Chair, for letting me speak on behalf of how I'm feeling about this. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Thomas, you're not alone. And I'm going to ask David to stay up there a little while longer because those were my concerns. But then they explained to me over and over again that some of the projects that we had could not be funded through this mechanism. I know with some of the projects, some of the capital projects that we had. So if you all could talk a little bit, Courtney and David, one of you all about that, because I think what Commissioner's talking about is that there was a list of projects, although we had not voted on the projects, they were still kind of put out there. But based on the type of financing we got, you guys said that 1 or 2 or 3 of those projects couldn't be funded under this type of funds. So if you could talk a little bit about why these projects and what this type of bond does versus a building bond.
So I'm going to let Courtney speak on that, and then I'm also going to let Patrick address it.
Yeah, for the lease, this capital lease transaction, we're limited to a certain dollar amount. I think the number is 25 million, right, Patrick? With the real estate, it's a state law.
That's correct.
Situation. So that's why we couldn't issue. We already have some outstanding. So this kind of maximizes what we can do under this type of financing structure, if you would. And then Patrick, do you want to talk about the other, I guess, where we are with the courts and things like that?
Sure. So if the board might remember one of the early presentations that your management team gave you about the capital projects, there was a spreadsheet. And it listed a number of projects and it then listed the alternative sources of funding available. So we could free up about $25 million for under a lease purchase agreement that we've done today. And that is I guess in the world of government finance, that's one of the least difficult ones to get. It's an easier financial transaction than, say, a general obligation bond. Your SPLOST bond, which we're able to do today, has already been authorized by the voters. So your really big projects that are out there, your courthouse and things like that, because they were not included as SPLOST projects, we have to find another way to finance those. And what we've done to get you to that point is we created the Urban Redevelopment Agency, which may or may not work depending on with the courthouse, with the location and whether that area is going to qualify as an urban redevelopment area. And what we're probably going to end up looking at doing is going to the voters for the approval of some just general obligation debt. We're limited in our ability to borrow money, unlike a business. If we were just a business that generated $160 million a year in revenue, we could just go down the street to the local bank and get a loan. They'd probably make it to us. But the government is limited. The Georgia law does not allow us just to call the bank and say, we want a loan, we want to borrow $150 million. And if they did, we could probably do that, but we can't. So we're limited in first of all, in how we can borrow money. And then there's the practical issue of something like the courthouse. We just, I think today, authorized the manager to bring back at the next meeting a proposal for engineering and design and such as that. So you don't want to go borrow money for the courthouse when you're not ready to proceed with the courthouse. You've got all these transaction costs, you've got all the loan stuff, and your clock starts ticking on repayment. So we want to make sure that we borrow money for a project when we're ready to do that project. So that's the practical reason, and I know that may not satisfy your concerns, but that's the practical reason for taking this in bites that are achievable, because we're ready to, you are absolutely ready to spend your SPOS bond money. I got that impression just a little while ago. You are ready, subject to your approval of the individual projects, to spend that $17 million. This money will go quick. But we're not ready to spend $90 million on the courthouse expansion. We're not ready to spend another, ever how many millions of dollars it is on those other capital projects. So that's the reason, that's the practical reason why you do these things in stages. And we are limited in how much we can borrow on these capital, on the lease purchase agreement. We can only go $25 million, and I think we still have a little bit outstanding that applies against that 25 million. So we've done as much as we can do in the immediate term. I don't know that we immediately could borrow any more money than we have borrowed, absent getting further voter approval or going ahead after we get the courthouse plan. That would be when we start looking at all of the ways to finance it, depending on exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. That's when we'll be looking at how to finance. That's right.
I just want to add, I mean, the way we're doing this, commissioners, is there's no additional burden. And this is one of the things Commissioner Clemens had, or Vice Chair Clemens had actually talked to. She doesn't want an additional burden on the taxpayers going forward. And so that's why we plan this out as a team, or as debt rolls off, we continue to be able to pay debt. We won't have to increase our millage rate to have a millage rate for an additional bond or for the URA once we go back out. And so as we plan this out, we're making certain that we're also looking out for our taxpayers.
Madam Vice Chair, thank you for allowing that interaction to take place. I think the key to what was said was that the capital lease program maximum is $25 million. Okay. And a lot of times we go all around the world, but the people need to understand what we are doing. So they won't feel like you all advertise you're doing this. You stated this in a meeting. You put this in an agenda. You wrote this, so you put that in the newspaper, and then we come up with 25 million, with $17 million. So a lot of times, like I said, we have to make sure that the communication that we're putting out in the public is informative and not just for the sake of communication. So at this point in time, the capital lease purchase max that we can do by law is $25 million. I do understand the fact we don't want to sit on money we're not ready to use. That's not the goal. The goal is to say, this is what we were anticipating, which was a whole lot more money. And we have a whole lot of more different projects out there. They will not all be happening within this first set of money. So that's what I was getting to, because it really didn't feel well just to say, we got 17 million, well, $19 million, whichever those figures are at this point in time. But I am satisfied with the answer that this is the best that we can do with this capital lease purchase that we have before us, and that we have to look at alternative things as we go forward. We definitely need to talk about whether or not we're going to develop this urban development group to find other monies to work through as we go forward. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for allowing that interaction.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the board before we move on? So at this time, I would like to call for a motion to proceed with the approval of this bond. I have a motion. And a second. All in favor? Stephanie, it's a 5-0 approving the resolution for the financing of the amount of $17.230 million.
And Vice Chair Clemens, before you move to the next item, I would like to let the board know this transaction likewise will close. We're anticipating to close August 18th or 19th, I believe. And it closes very similar to a basic real estate transaction. There is, however, one more step that this board will have to undergo because it's a lease purchase agreement. We are required to have a public hearing on that lease purchase, and that is being advertised now for the August 18th meeting. There will be no action needs to be taken. We just need to convene a public hearing. So you will be hearing about this one more time, but otherwise you have taken all the action you need to take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's, I think Ron is presenting from DOT.
Vice Chair, Commissioners, good evening.
Good evening.
The Henry County Department of Transportation reached out to Georgia Power as requested by the District 2 Commissioner Clemens for non-revenue streetlights on Jonesboro Road starting at I-75 to the Clayton County line. Based on preliminary design from Georgia Power, projected a cost of approximately $8,000 a month or approximately 140 each 280-watt LED area lights. There'd be no upfront costs associated with this. The total number of lights and monthly costs are subject to change based on the final design, which we think the final design is what it is right now. There shouldn't be any more changes to it. Costs will be paid monthly out of the DOT budget and the line item for non-revenue street lights. If anyone has any questions, I'll certainly ask. Commissioner, you're muted.
If there are no more questions, we'll just call for the motion to approve the resolution with the understanding that the rest of the contracts will be coming at the next meeting for the rest of the projects. We have a motion and a second with the discussion from Commissioner Wilson. You're on mute.
Commissioner, you're muted.
So I have a statement and a question. So I would like to get all the streetlights we were talking about this morning, put it all under one resolution and see what the pricing is going to be. Then we're going to have to figure out how we're going to fund them. So that's what I thought was moving toward.
Commissioner Wilson, this was the one that you tabled back in April 7th, and I talked to the county manager and the attorney about that as well. Each one has to come back before us with a contract from the power company. So this is the Georgia Power one. Each one of them will be individual and have to come back with the contract. So we have to do each contract separately.
Yeah, but we're looking at how we're going to fund all of these projects that we was talking about this morning. So when we put all these streetlights throughout the county, and if this one right here is going to be $8,000 per month, we could be looking at, I don't know, it's going to be on up there a couple $1 million. Could be. I don't know how many lights we're talking about throughout the county. So we're going to figure out how we're going to pay for all these.
Well, that's what the tax dollars are for. So we'll just, I agree with you. That's what the tax dollars are for. And that's what the constituents are saying, that they need to have the streets lit up, streets wide, streets paved. So that's what the tax dollars are supposed to be for. I don't think it's, we're spending tax dollars on a lot of stuff. And I think it's very, it's time for us to spend tax dollars on the roads.
Oh, I get it. But I'd like to see a total of it throughout the county, then figure out how we're going to pay for all of them.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? So Commissioner Stephanie and all opposed? So we have a 3-2, Stephanie. Stephanie, you got the vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Board.
So we're at the end of the meeting. We will have another hearing at our meeting on August 11th at 6 p.m. for the millage rate adoption. And we're expecting the county manager and assistant county manager to come back with us on contracts for the rest of the lights so that we can move forward. If there are no more comments from the board, we're going to call for a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Barnes, call for the motion. Commissioner Thomas, second. All in favor for adjournment? 5-0. Stephanie, have a good night.